First tonight, a scaffolding collapse which killed a man is described by a judge as a disaster waiting to happen.
John Robinson was working on the construction of an 11-storey hotel in the centre of Milton Keynes when he plunged to his death. In the last couple of hours, 2 construction companies have been fined tens of thousands of pounds. Our reporter Joe Black is outside the court in Huntingdon now. Joe.
Susie, today ends 3.5 years' worth of legal processes for John Robinson's family. They were far from impressed with the sentences handed down today here at Huntingdon Crown Court to the 2 companies involved. Those companies were McAleer and Rush, the principal contractor, and they were guilty of breaching 2 sections of the Health and Safety at Work Act. Then there was Lee Smith Carpentry, which employed John Robinson and his son Mark. They were guilty of contravening regulations. Now let's have a quick look at a list of some of the failings from that day. The management on the site was inadequate. Scaffolding was not built to industry standards. In fact, in court today, it was described as shoddy, lacking ties, ledges and bracings. And it was overloaded with materials. And the risk assessments, there were failures in making those assessments and supervisions. Although this accident had tragic consequences, the Health and Safety Executive told us today it was a miracle that more people weren't injured or killed. Those who witnessed it said it came down with a thunderous roar. 11 stories worth of scaffolding brought down like a pack of cards. 3 workers were trapped, seriously injured under the mangled mess that day. They were 49-year-old John Robinson, a carpenter, his son Mark and an electrician.
I had a phone call from my daughter and she said Dad and Mark have been in a collapse at work at the hotel, jury's in, and they believe that they're under it all, and just could you get here, Mum, now? And I was just in disbelief actually. I don't know how I drove to jury's in. I got there somehow and I was just a bit numb at first. I think it wasn't happening to me.
3 days later, John suffered a heart attack triggered by the injuries he sustained. For Mark, who got his dad the job, feelings of immeasurable guilt.
I just felt guilty that I'd survived and Dad hadn't, but we'd both been through the same thing. And I'd seemed to be worse than Dad was. I suppose for Mum as well, I felt guilty she'd been left alone. But she's been really strong. Admire her.
Today at Huntingdon Crown Court, representatives from McAleer and Rush, who had pleaded guilty to breaching sections of the Health and Safety Act, and Lee Smith Carpentry, guilty of contravening regulations, were sentenced. We heard that McAleer and Rush had been served prohibition and improvement notices on other construction sites before. Both companies, we were told, were sorry and said lessons had been learnt. McAleer and Rush were ordered to pay £132,000 in fines and costs. LSC, £64,000 in fines and costs. A third company, North Knot Scaffolding, which erected the scaffold, has since been wound up. The managing director, John King, fled to Spain. A warrant is still out for his arrest. John's family are trying not to be bitter, but they say today's sentence brings them little comfort. Well, you saw Christine and Mark in that report. I'd filmed with them a couple of days ago. Tonight, they were far too upset to speak to us on camera. Instead, Christine has given us a handwritten statement, and she says, John and I had many plans for the future. Among them was to grow old together. Employers have to make safety a priority for everyone working in and around their workplace. John is sorely missed every day since he was taken from us. Susie.
Joe, thank you very much. The police have raided a series of massage parlours in Suffolk and Essex as part of a crackdown on human trafficking. But rather than breaking down the door with a battering ram, they simply made appointments with the women involved. This report is from Gareth George.
A briefing for 70 police officers. This was Operation Helios. The aim, to rescue women being exploited by the sex industry.
This is going to be a sensitive operation and need you all to be on top of your game.
In Colchester, 5 different teams headed for 5 different addresses. We followed one team to a respectable part of town. It seemed an unlikely location for a raid on a massage parlour.
You'd think this was just a quiet house in a Colchester suburb, until, that is, you had a look upstairs.
One of the main things is actually when you look at the bedroom in detail, you notice there are no personal items. Yes, there might be a clock, there might be a couple of lamps, a couple of candles. That's all for effect.
Police believe some of the women who work in nondescript rooms like this may have got into debt back home in the Far East and are brought over here to earn money to pay that debt off.
They will then be told you're going to England to work maybe in the restaurant trade or at a nail bar or some other premises, and when they get over here they're then told what they're actually going to be involved in. And because of their sense of duty, they have no choice but to carry out the wishes of their captors, really, and they're given either a train voucher or money to get to a premises, given a contact number, and that's it. They are in the sex trade.
This was one of 7 arrests on suspicion of offences including managing a brothel and human trafficking. Off camera, neighbours said they had their suspicions about number 168, but they were still surprised their respectable neighbourhood may have been touched by human trafficking. Gareth George, BBC Look East.
A village primary school closed today after one of its pupils died of suspected swine flu. The 5-year-old boy died yesterday after being admitted to hospital in Milton Keynes.
In a school of just 29 pupils, including this boy and his big sister, any sudden death would be devastating. But this, with its possible health implications, is especially distressing. Today, the school took delivery of some new desks and the opportunity to do some deep cleaning.
It's certainly the first time in my experience that one of our children has died. But we are very sensitive and skilled and trained in how to handle these situations, and we'll be just very open and honest with the children and try and answer their questions as best we can.
The boy only started school at the beginning of term. He went home ill on Friday and died just a day and a half later. Reverend Cadell is a governor at the school, but spoke to us in his role as the local vicar.
I've only met him briefly because I went in to do assemblies, but from everything I saw of him and have heard from the staff, he was a very friendly boy, very outgoing, the type of boy that everybody else wanted to sit next to.
Across the east of England, 12 swine flu deaths have been confirmed. Children are a high-risk group, with 40% of all paediatric intensive care beds being taken up by swine flu cases. Just last week, the government announced that it wanted to extend the swine flu vaccination programme to children aged between 6 months and 5 years. Officials said they'd been shocked at how quickly some children had succumbed to the virus. But it's come too late for this little boy and his family. Nikki Jenkins, BBC Look East in Emberton.
There's growing anger tonight over a security breach at one of the region's leading research centres. The police have been called in after computer hackers stole hundreds of documents from the Climatic Research Unit at the University of East Anglia. Our chief reporter Kim Riley is in our newsroom now. Kim.
Yes, the Climatic Research Unit is one of the leading international voices arguing that climate change is not only real but effectively man-made. Now thousands of pages of data, documents and private emails have found their way onto the internet, leading to claims that some of this data has been manipulated by scientists. The timing hardly seems like coincidence. The arguments over climate change are set to be centre stage at the Copenhagen summit next month. 60 presidents and prime ministers, delegates from 192 countries, will gather to try and hammer out a new global deal to curb emissions of CO2. The sceptics are claiming the research unit hacker has blown global warming out of the water, found evidence of manipulating data. They've picked up on the word trick in one email and talk of hiding the decline. The UEA says the claims are based on tiny bits of information taken out of context. And there's real upset among the scientists that much private material, including bank and passport details, has been compromised.
I don't think there's any question at all that there's been manipulation of data. I think there may be some careless and unfortunate emails have been exchanged, but not manipulation. And, you know, the science is pretty much universal. We have scientists from all across the world. This does not depend on the scientists in East Anglia, and we have no doubt that that is good science.
Yesterday, climate change campaigners marched through Norwich. They believe global warming is a very real threat to the future of the planet. Among the marchers, anger at the theft of material from the CRU.
Well, I think hacking into anybody's privacy is dreadful itself, but for a cause such as this, where the future of the planet's at stake, I think it's unbelievable.
But tonight, out there in the blogosphere, the research unit emails are fueling a war of words over global warming. Some viewers believe that anything that doesn't support global warming is effectively being suppressed. Mike Smith emailed, "They no longer deserve the title scientist when it appears a large amount of public funding is being used to find something, anything, and if that's not possible, to massage the data to prove the hypothesis." And John Jules says the new material has raised serious doubts about the data. Well, finally, the director of the unit, Professor Phil Jones, says the word trick in one of his emails was used colloquially, as in a clever thing to do. It's ludicrous, he says, to suggest it refers to anything untoward.